Sophia Swimmar again to Sewanee, where she used to teach 2003, 2008. Professor Swimmar comes from Elon University, North Carolina, where she teaches in the Department of Political Science. And we gave a wonderful lecture last night on LGBT rights in Croatia, Serbia, and Bosnia, and Eastern Europe in general. And Professor Swimmar also held recently had a Fulbright fellowship in Bosnia.
Actually, my husband was here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it wasn't that recent, but yeah, so I was here 2003 to 2008, but from 6 to 7, I was actually not physically here. I was doing research in
So this is part 2 of Professor Swimmar's visit, a workshop during which we hope to learn more about what you're doing at Elon University as far as things global are concerned, and perhaps we can learn a lot from you.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. Thank you again to Justina for inviting me. It's been so fun to come back here and have that reason to come. I've wanted to come back all these years, and it's always a question of getting here, and now I have a reason to come and see old friends and things like that. So I'm happy to come. So I did want to say that I definitely don't want to see myself as an expert in this area, and I also see when I've looked at what Sewanee's been doing since I left and even when I was here, you guys are doing a lot of things and a lot of new things I've been hearing just over the last 2 days since I left in terms of internationalization and globalization. And so I really hope this could be a conversation. I do have PowerPoint, so it kind of is a luxury kind of beginning, but I hope that we can learn from each other and see sort of what are some of the strengths and challenges that both of us are dealing with. Elon, I don't know if you know a lot about Elon, but it is a master's granting institution, so our largest number of undergraduates are in the College of Arts and Sciences, so liberal arts on the model kind of that Sewanee is familiar with, and sort of engaged learning and undergraduate research and things like that is definitely kind of where I think our strength is. But we also have School of Communications and a School of Business, so we do have some undergraduates there who just kind of jump into the arts and sciences once in a while. And then we have some for the School of Public Health and the law school. So we do have those professional programs. I don't feel like we connect with them as much because we kind of stay with our arts and sciences kind of people. But when we talk about kind of global education and things like that, definitely our Global Education Center is trying to reach across the whole university and not just focus on arts and sciences, even though that's where most of the students who do things like study abroad and all that. So basically what I thought I would do is, I'm not going to give a lot of theory and sort of concepts that we'll talk a little bit about that, but I felt it was more important to get to the tangibles. And so I tried to highlight some of the ways that Elon is trying to sort of create a kind of cohesive understanding of global engagement. And I thought I would just focus on 2 specific things, and I hope we have time for both of them. Since obviously when Justina was telling me about globalization of higher education, I mean, it's like this big of a topic. So I thought, let me just pick a couple areas that one that I know a lot about, that I've been personally involved in, so I can speak from experience. And so I thought picking one kind of abroad and one kind of more at home would kind of be useful. So I'll look at study abroad and residential living and learning as kind of just 2 things, but I think the conversation should be free to go all over the place and not just focus on this. This is actually a picture from just a couple months ago for the winter term program that I lead to London. It's called Multicultural Learning, and I'll talk more about it in a minute. But this is a Sikh temple that we visited in Birmingham with our group. We only had 15 students on this group. So it was a really great course, so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I don't want to get into the really nitty-gritty about what the differences between those 2 terms, and I also wanted to throw out the term global citizenship, but I kind of want to save that to the end because I think that could actually take like 30 minutes if we talk about what I wanted to talk about with global citizenship. But I think some of these things tie in with that notion of global citizenship, which both our schools have in terms of when you read mission statements and things like that, it talks about that. I think global engagement is a little more hands-on in terms of these are some of the things that I think us at Elon think that global engagement kind of connects to. I think it's both connected to students, but obviously connected to the institution and the university. So, number 5 can be faculty members and students, but it can be the institution more broadly. I think number 3 is pretty important. I think a lot of times when we talk about global engagement and global citizenship, my colleague who teaches the London course, and he always says, how is it that we don't first say, or think critically about our own society, as opposed to, not as opposed to, but as a first step to, let's go out and like do all this action out there, right? So again, I'm not saying any of that is negative, but he sort of felt like, as part of this global engagement, it's not just me learning everything I need to know or want to know about India and go there and do something, but to understand my own identity, what is America, sort of how America fits into that, and then be able to connect that in a kind of global way. So when I say critical thinking, that is part of that, but it could be also critical thinking in more. Obviously, intercultural communication is another one of the main goals and topics in this field that I think we can get to in a little while. At the end, toward the end is where I want to ask you guys a little bit more about what are kind of some of the most top priority goals that you have as someone who's been thinking about global engagement and what you might do. These are just kind of general suggestions that I have been thinking about and talking to all my colleagues at Elon about, and even talking to some of you last night at dinner, is this idea that it's much stronger to try to infuse global engagement throughout the university as opposed to keeping it, within languages or keeping it within residential life or whatever, but trying to have it be something that is, as I said, infused there. I think this global culture is really important, and I'm going to talk about that. I think one of the strengths of Elon is that it's become kind of part of Elon culture that you think about global things or that you study abroad, whether it's short-term or long-term. And that also connects to the faculty sort of investment and buy-in and training, right? That you need to find ways to get the faculty to not see this as like, oh, this is extra work, that's unpaid, or this is something that's not part of, my job description or something like that. And so some of the specifics I'm going to talk about here in a minute, I think try to get at some of these points about culture, visibility of things that are going on campus, so that's, for example, our global neighborhood that I'll talk about. Obviously, this is always a stickler when we start talking about these issues, is this issue of quantity over quality. When I've been talking to different people, they'll say, our study abroad office, or what we call our Global Education Center, they're all about the numbers because Elon is gaining a much higher profile than it used to because of global engagement or internationalization. 72% of our students study abroad, and that's considered in our category, we're number one. I think that's the category of master's granting institutions. That does include short-term and the long-term. And so when I've talked to people, they say that when we start talking about quality, right, and we get into the liberal arts and sort of things like connected to global citizenship, or are they actually having an immersive experience? Are they actually transforming themselves when they go abroad, or are they just taking a trip, right? I mean, we know some of these arguments. And then the concern is the study abroad office side of things going to be interested in changing the structures and creating things that may make students less likely to want to go abroad, right? And so they're concerned about the numbers. So that's one challenge we can sort of talk about is you have different goals, right? One side might be thinking more about numbers and quantity, and the other side might be thinking more about quality, and we want both, but how do we do that? So this is just like super broad before I get go specific about some of the things that I think work together well at Elon. They sort of show how we have been somewhat successful, I think pretty successful at this, in internationalization. I think when you look at our strategic plan, there's a strong commitment from the top, sort of on down, about internationalization and global engagement. And I don't think it's just rhetoric. I mean, it's repeated a lot in terms of the literature and sort of from the president's office. But I think it has to be something that the leadership is 100% behind. The curriculum, I know you guys have done a lot with the curriculum in terms of international global studies, so I want to hear a little bit more about that. We have first-year seminars that are called, so they're 100 level courses, and they're called the Global Experience. Every single student has to take a course called the Global Experience. And no matter if you're a chemistry professor or an international studies professor. So the downside of that is that, can we be sure that the chemistry professor, nothing against the chemistry professor, but that he or she has the skill set to sort of talk about what might be considered a global experience. But we have a set of 7 objectives that are broad enough that whoever's teaching that from whatever perspective can find a way to make it work. So there's something about, science is global also, right? It's not just, culture and language. So the strength is that a lot of students come in already, or the first minute they get there, already thinking about things from a global perspective. And the courses that are smaller in terms of number as well. So the winter terms, as I mentioned, are part of the curriculum as well, and I'm going to talk about them in a minute as well. We do have a goal of 100% study abroad access. Obviously, that doesn't mean 100% of students will go, because some simply don't want to go. And even though we can push this idea that we should all be, helping construct global citizens, we have to accept that some students have no interest in leaving their home state, and we shouldn't obviously require that for everyone. But access is key, and so we've tripled the number of scholarships that we've been able to give for study abroad, because we don't want the money to be the reason that somebody can't go, right? So if somebody is just really excited to have this kind of experience, then we have to somehow come, right? I don't think that means every single person, is getting to get a scholarship, but from what I've been hearing, it's definitely more. I'm going to talk a little bit, and I want to hear more from you guys about how we can enhance study abroad through pre- and post-study reflection. We also have programs that are now called Study Away or Study USA. So it's about finding diversity and global engagement right here in the U.S., right? You don't have to go abroad to find some type of globalization process going on. You can work with immigrants, you can go to diverse places and things like that. And then the global neighborhood is our new residential area we'll talk about. So just to talk about the short term, I know that you guys are having a conversation here on campus about what you might do or change in terms of the short term. When we look at the research, we do see that the biggest growth in study abroad for students is the short term, right? Students, whether it's cost, whether I don't want to be away from home or campus for too long, I want to kind of get my feet wet before I go 6 months somewhere. And so we tend to see at Elon that the winter term and how popular winter term has become, winter term abroad especially, has led to improved numbers in our semester study abroad and in our dual degree programs where we have 2-year programs, 2 years in Elon, 2 years in France or Germany, and you get 2 degrees. So we think that the winter terms are really successful in part because we do see the numbers, kind of students taking the winter term and then, oh, I did that, I survived, like that's interesting, I want to do more of that. This is just a small sample. We have over 40, they change year to year. They are theme-based, they are taught by faculty with emphasis or expertise in the area. I mentioned a few of them, the US-based ones that I think can have a kind of global component, even if they're not explicitly that. For international students, we have one that goes to the American South, and so kind of like civil rights and a lot of the Alabama, Tennessee. So they're getting their global on the other side. I think some of the benefits of that, yeah, please interrupt me.
How long is your winter term?
Okay, so winter term is January 2nd to January 26th. So it is most of the January, so 3.5 weeks. And then we have what's called a fake break, which is 1 week between January 25th or 6th and February, whatever week might be in the calendar, like February 5th or something. Maybe that's even longer than a week.
All of these led by your faculty?
These are all led by faculty.
And are they paid extra to do that?
So how it works is it's part of your teaching load.
Okay.
Okay, so our teaching load is 3-3. Some semesters or years it's 3-2 because we have course releases that we share around the departments for research or service. So let's just say it's 3-3. But it can be 3-1-2. Okay, so 1 means your January term, your winter term, and then you only teach 2 in the spring. If you have course releases, like I have a course release for being an international studies coordinator, I'm only teaching 1 class right now because I did winter term and I have a course off. Right? So part of the reason why I think we've been so successful, both in getting faculty and students, is that it's part of your teaching load. So nobody feels that they are having to kind of put themselves out there. And a lot of faculty like having more time in the spring to do whatever, and to have this, another thing is there are 2 faculty members teaching it, and both counts as a full load. So you do not
Don't get too low.
So it's not just half, even though you're kind of a half, right, in terms of, now we do have sometimes staff going, right? We want to make staff part of our global, engagement. We don't want to leave them out. And so there are a number of programs where they need a staff person more for the logistics, right? So the faculty member has more of the expertise, but they need someone to just be there in case of emergency, but also do a lot of the technical and logistical stuff. And so we have had staff. I don't think that's the majority of the programs, but a lot of times.
So do the students get one full course
So
credit?
students get a full course credit, we're on a 4 credit system instead of 3, so they get one full course, which is
And
4.
where are those housed, in various places?
The credits are,
Yeah, was this gen ed or?
okay, so this is considered the core curriculum. So it's like a 300 level core seminar that would count, everyone needs to take one of those. Actually, sometimes they're 200, actually.
So the one in field biology wouldn't necessarily only apply to biology, or would it?
No, it really does depend on the course, because my London one actually doesn't count for the core. It counts for international studies, poverty and social justice, counts for peace and conflict, counts for European.
Those
So
are minors.
those are minors, you're right. So they don't all count for the core stuff, but they all count for something. So it's not like an elective really for anyone. I think everyone can find somewhere. The biology one, I don't know. That probably could count for biology, but maybe it wouldn't count for something else.
And would ecotourism be underneath like ecology, or?
We have environmental
Environmental
studies, so
studies.
it really be into that, yeah.
Do students have to take winter term every year or?
It's completely optional, but the other benefit is it's part of their fall tuition. Okay, so that's the other reason why I think, and here's our numbers, just to kind of give you some numbers. So winter term is the dark one. Red is the semester, red is everybody studying abroad, right? So we had 1,200 just this last year out of 40 something, 500 maybe. And then the semester is the smaller one. But you can see, we're very proud of the fact that everything seems to be going up. We want to be even higher, but the good news is that it's definitely going up. And we're particularly happy that the semester is going up.
How will you make financial, maybe this isn't recreative or main questions, but financially able to make it clear so that the administrators would want to support this? Because we've been having a little bit of a drift back away from it because there's this feeling that money's going somewhere else. And,
You mean like to do this, you have to take money?
like our kids who go abroad, some of the money goes abroad and doesn't stay here, so there's a bit of a backlash we're facing now. A little bit is the erosion going on. How is this? It's all in-house, so.
Well, the money right now is not free, right? So the students still have to pay to get themselves over there and to pay for lodging and to pay for food, right? Some food, like on our London program, all the group meals are included in their like fee, right? But then whatever breakfast and stuff they have to pay for. Of course, London's going to be more expensive than, let's say, Nicaragua, right? Or whatever program. New Zealand is, I think, our most expensive one. So what they don't have to pay for is the tuition part. Right? So my salary, my colleague's salary, that's part of the normal teaching. So it is something that, a really cash-strapped, student is probably not going to be able to do it. There are also some scholarships available.
So they're
Triple, I think that was for the full semester though.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think that that's for the,
So when you said that students have 100% access,
that's our goal. It's not
oh,
right
okay.
now.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay.
I probably should put the word goal, but I messed that up.
Okay.
Yeah, that's our goal.
Okay.
The other thing about students, you asked if it's required. So they also can do a winter term on campus. And we've had for the last 2 years diversity as one of the themes for the on-campus winter term. So that doesn't mean every on-campus course is about diversity, but enough of them are that we then have extra programming and cultural events going on about diversity. And that can be local diversity, that can be global diversity, it's very broadly defined. So we feel like if you're not going to do a winter term abroad and you're going to stay at home, there's still some component of kind of globalization and diversity going on, right? So I think that that's important. Some students don't want to do any winter term at all, right? They just want to go home and hang out, or they want to work, or whatever they want to do, and that's fine too. But I would say that, I don't have the numbers actually, but I think the majority of students are doing some kind of winter term. If you look at, all of these programs being full to the max.
And these are graded programs, it's not pass and pass.
They're all graded. Obviously, there's some concern about kind of like strengths and weaknesses, maybe at different institutions in terms of faculty buy-in. Will they want to sign up to do a winter term course? We don't have any problem with that. The faculty are so excited that they can have this as one of their courses. They can decide, where do I want to go? What's in my expertise? The Global Education Center helps with the logistics, so it's not like you're on your own to figure out like housing and tour buses and all of that stuff, right? The other thing I think that's important Oh, the other thing that's kind of a challenge though is there is variation in the rigor of those courses, right? That's just gonna happen, right? So, not to toot my own horn, but I think our London Multiculturalism class is amazing because it's extremely experiential. The students are, I don't know if that over here was in these pictures, the students are put into pairs and they are sent out, I mean sent out kind of sounds negative, but they go out into London communities that are mostly sort of immigrant communities. So they go to Southall, which is mostly South Asian, and Brixton, we have a lot of Afro-Caribbean. And we know those areas, we've scouted them all out before, so we know there's things going on there for them to do. But they basically go out and try to learn about the community by interviewing people, going to like community centers, going to homeless shelters, going to mosques, Sikh temples, churches, and they run the course, right? We don't have any lecturing going on really while we're there. We do have a pre-departure course, so I didn't mention that all of our winter term courses, and if you're doing summer, as you guys do here, or something else, that's another thing that's kind of the big trend to deepen the experience, is that you really need a pre and a post experience. So when we had no pre and no post, and we just did winter term, there was a lot of complaints from the faculty that students are calling this a trip. They're going just for 3 weeks to hang out in Barbados on the beach, and now they're talking about eco stuff on the side, but it's not really what we want in terms of study abroad, for sure. So we instituted the pre-departure course, which is 7 meeting times that are like 2 hours each. So I think it's 14 contact hours in a semester. And faculty are paid, I think I got like 1,000 extra to do those 14 hours. And then that's where you have the readings. As you can see here, we were reading about theoretical issues, in this case about visual representation, because our focus was also photography in these communities as well. And my colleague is a photographer. So we had all kinds of discussions about identity theory and the politics of immigration and concepts about multiculturalism, all of that in papers and debates, and then learning about the communities, learning about the history of Britain, like all of that happened before we met.
But when?
In the fall.
January 2nd, oh,
In the fall,
okay.
right. So September 7th to whatever, every like 2 to 3 weeks for like 2 hours.
So these students, those pre-departure courses get the students credits, or is that?
So they
part
get
of-
1 credit.
They get one.
One out of the 4, so 4 is our system, so they get 1 credit.
They get one
So it's not a full course, it's like a little bit of the credit that will really count.
No, plus the 4.
Oh,
So it's not part of the 4 they get in the January, it's 1 and then 4, so in the end they have 5.
And do some students take that pre-course and don't go abroad?
No, I've never, I mean, there might be someone who like they got sick or something, but
So that's 9 hours or 14?
7 meetings, but 14 hours.
So how do you get the students to plan ahead enough that they? Planning to
Okay,
go
this is
in
a problem.
January.
This is a problem. So I just got back from London in January. Already March 5th was a winter term study abroad fair. So already 10 months in advance, all the winter term programs are in this big hall with the brochures, with students who've gone before to kind of sell the program and things like that. They get emails, saying that the priority application deadline is like, I think right now is a priority application, right? So some of these fill up really quickly, right? Like I think the Australia one right away. So if you really know you want to go to Australia, you've got to sign up like in March or April. But you can sign up all the way till September 18th, like when the pre-departure course essentially starts. We would like everyone to do it by May, because when we know when summer comes, no one's thinking about it. But they're signing up, because I think, like I said, it's part of the culture. Like everyone's like, hey, where are you going for winter? Where are you going for winter? Are you staying here? Are you going to take a course? Like it's become so common that nobody's sort of, in September like, oh, I didn't even think about winter term, I better start. They know that they have to sign up early. They have to put some kind of deposit down. They do get some money back if there's like a deadline to get some of the money back. Then there's another deadline, half your communities do it.
So they can take the time they need to actually, for some students who are not coming from wealthy families, they have some time to
They
get that
do,
money
they do.
together.
They have till September
Including
18th.
summer, like
They could work all summer, see how much they get, and then, now the problem may be if it's a super popular one, there may not be the space for them, and I don't know that we have a plan for like saving spaces and things like that. Our London course is never filled up, so that, has never been a problem.
And financially, it does or does not apply to these?
It does apply,
Okay.
right, because it's part of the tuition, so whatever they have should, well,
But that doesn't
But
affect
that's-
them by plane ticket.
no, that's not gonna help them with that, yeah. So the tuition is already covered in whatever they paid for that fall semester, but it's not gonna cover the plane ticket. and the lodging. So the cost, London, I think, is 5,500. And I think there's some in the 4,000s and there's some in the 6. I think 4 to 6 is kind of the range.
Are there scholarships to help students with those costs, like plane fare, lodging?
I am not positive. I've been hearing about scholarships, and I think that was referred to the full semester. So I don't think that there are, which is a problem. I mean, 4,000 is not just like your line round.
Can they get a rebate on their room and board if they're not living on campus?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Because if they're doing winter term on campus, they are staying in their rooms. Yeah,
I
I
mean, it
never.
wouldn't be 4,000, but.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that. But that's something we could check into, right? Like, yeah, that would be a good idea. I'm sorry.
I want to.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
But it's, because
No.
I think it's an excellent idea. Yeah, so the applications, they're all due the same time, there's like a
Well,
common
it's
clearinghouse.
rolling, right? So there's
Right.
like a priority deadline, and then there's like a gap where they don't look at them every day. So the global education people are not just accepting them every single day. There's like a March deadline, and then they apply, then they accept a chunk.
But it's not like Patterson has one deadline, Mark has one deadline.
No.
Everybody,
No, they're all the
it's
same.
all the same.
It's all the same. It's all the same.
So there's standardization.
Right. And they do, I don't think they have to write an essay or anything. Maybe the ones that are like really overbooked, I don't know if the faculty in those have had some kind of process to like pick the best students. We try to really do word of mouth. So in my London program, I will go to different classes that connect to the theme, and I'll try to sell the course and tell them it counts for this and how good it is. I've had students that went with me before go with me to the class to try to sell it. Because again, when I think about the weaknesses, I think part of the reason we may have had trouble with getting students the last few years to our program is because it is a very challenging program. Like if you've never been abroad anywhere and now you're off in some immigrant community of London to go knock on the door of a mosque and say, "Hi, I'm from North Carolina and I want to talk to you about Islamic relations in the community." I mean, it's very challenging. But the students kind of self-select, and the ones who go in this program, they know it's going to be challenging, but it's going to be super amazing. I mean, the number of students who've come out of this program, and I don't want to oversell it, but really transformed. Like students, the one student who worked with some homeless people in a shelter or a kind of community center, I guess, teaching English. And she said, I grew up my whole life thinking homeless people were, lazy and bad and they were dangerous. And my mom said, don't talk to them, don't get near them on the street. And I was so scared when I got to London. And when I got to my community, you guys had mentioned there was this interesting community center, I should check it out. And I was really worried. And now I've spent 3 weeks teaching English to this, man, and I just have a completely, like, my whole world is like, and for a lot of students, that's kind of how they go. And I think if we talk about quality and deepening these experiences for students, then they come back and they apply that, then I think we need, kind of, these are what I think are like the best practices, we need some kind of exposure, or integration with the local community, but that's not always possible, and it depends on the faculty member, right? Are they going to make the effort to make the local community very connected to the course, or are they going to, and not to say that about my colleagues, but are they going to, go to, one church after another and one tourist site after another in Europe, and then that kind of be the field trip, right? So that is the kind of downside of this, is that there isn't a huge amount of quality control, like from somewhere else saying, it has to be, this level of experiential learning or this level of engagement. Now you do have to have these courses approved like any other course, and there are some obviously there's some standards, but there's definitely variation in the courses. And this, again, when you talk about the pre-departure course, we're also now talking about the post-course, or post-experience. And when we think about full semester study abroad, that's where I think, for everyone, we need to think more seriously about the reflection and what to do when you come out. Because so many students in my program, international studies, they have to go abroad, just like your students have to go abroad. And that's one of my questions is, what do you do when they come back, right? Because I think for some reason they're dying to talk about it. After 2 days of their parents asking them, so what did you do? Right? The question is usually like, what did you do when you were there? Not like, how did it change you? Like, what are your thoughts now about X, Y, Z? And even their friends when they come back. Oh, what did you do when you were in France? You know, da, da, da. And then the students will report after 2 to 3 days, nobody wants to talk about it, nobody wants to hear about it. And I'm left in my own head to just kind of figure out what happened to me while I was abroad. Did I change? And then you come back and some of them don't want to go back to the sorority that they were in because they feel like that's not as important anymore. Or some of them kind of go back to being similar to who they were. But I don't think we don't have a really good process for doing that. So one, I want to know what you guys have, if anything, for that. And then I'll talk about a couple things that we're doing now, just like in this year, we're just now saying we've got to do something with this post-processing and reflection. So it isn't just like, go and do your thing, we assume you had some transformative experience, and then come back and everything's like it was. So yeah.
I wonder how you deal with the competition between the various public courses since they are at the same time.
True.
And also, is there a minimum number of students that you can take?
There is 18 has been our minimum, and the max is 24. We went to London with 15, so they kind of let us go, in part because my colleague was his very last year to ever do the course, and he wanted it to go, and they didn't want to cancel on him. So they let us go with 15. He went one time by himself with 10. They don't really like professors to go along just for the security, like what if something happened to him, and then who's going to take care of the students? But in that case, he was able to persuade them to let them go with 10, but that's unusual. It's usually going to be 2 faculty with more than 18. Competition, that's a hard one. I mean, I was out there selling like a salesperson, like literally, you're going to love it in London, and let me tell you, forget New Zealand, like who wants to go there? Because, we have the problem of the weather. I hate to say it, but students are going to be choosing Barbados and New Zealand, and maybe India or something, because, London in January is really busy. It's totally, but if you don't look at the weather part of it, then
Just
it's
Photoshop those pictures.
All these museums you're gonna see, or you can go, I'll take you to fish and chips.
yeah, exactly.
I have just to answer your question, what you do
Yes.
with study abroad, because I thought in IGS senior seminar,
Yeah.
that is probably the most organized.
I was gonna ask about
In the senior
this.
seminar, 400 level class, the students actually come back, all of them have been abroad by that time.
Right.
And they are supposed to work on their law paper, which turns out to be the thesis. Senior thesis is developing that senior.
Okay.
And
But
they
is
also,
that an academic paper, or
Oh,
does
yeah.
it?
yeah.
Okay, so how, does it get into the more like psychological,
Exactly.
emotional stuff?
And
or-
during the semester, their reflections on readings have to incorporate their experience.
Okay.
So
So
basically,
basically-
they pick a topic and they bring in their personal reflections and diaries and field notes and so on into that paper. I have seen that there
So
were
the
quite
paper's
successful.
both personal and, is there an
It's not-
academic
it's
topic
an
connected to the
academic
region
paper.
or the place that they went?
It's an academic paper with an ethnographic stance, so it's flat.
I'd like to learn more about like how you assign it, like what's the,
It's like a 35-page paper, serious paper.
yeah.
And they, for example, I had a really good example. One woman called Grace Pringle, I don't know if you guys know her. She wrote a wonderful paper on gender nationalism in Mongolia. She was very successful. And anyways, her paper was wonderful because it kind of brought in her experience of learning this instrument, which was a male instrument. Mostly men play this instrument. I forgot the name of it. And it's how she challenged those knowledge
Yeah.
in that community by learning how to play and play it well. And then that was her personal
Yeah.
experience, and then
She
she
was
engaged in the theories of nationalism
That
and
sounds
gender.
great, yeah, that's definitely one way.
Very theoretical. She ended up going to grad school after that, and she's very theoretical, but at the same time, she managed to.
Right.
The other part to the answer to your question, we've talked about, we have all these random acts of internationalization sort of, we have students going abroad for many different programs and departments, and we've talked about that we're missing many opportunities there in London. involves the debriefing of all the students who come back. And so we talked about that, and the administration's expressed an interest in having a way to not only help them reculturate, because they're going to use relatively severe culture clash when they get back, but also to, what a great resource that to share this. So we're interested right now, we were just talking about this, about trying to tap into that and find some way as an organization. Right now, it's all random, sort of, if we can have a unified way. And so, you know, Nadina said he's interested in potentially this international office playing a role. We haven't yet defined it, but that's one of the reasons we're happy to have you here too, is we're talking together about ways we could help our whole community learn from all of us individually or gathering abroad or where
And we have, we discussed this agreement, and I know the others don't know how far the task force of calendar has come along, but we are about to propose something that is going to short-term plus some other flexible options for kind of unifying all of these, not only study abroad, but also on-campus classes. And our study abroads would incorporate that pre and post within the same course. So there are some, there is some discussion of that. It will be, we were thinking of Rachel, but then we decided not to go with Rachel. We'll see the proposal, it's still in the works. And this was the result of that, the series that we conducted.
Well, one of the ways we do the post with the winter term, there's no official post right now. It's experimental. So we did this assessment project where there's a flaw in the research design because we didn't get enough students to fill out the surveys, right, as it always is. So the numbers are kind of messed up across the. But the preliminary results, we had one group that had a 1 credit post, kind of like the 1 credit before, a 1 credit after, right? To do a lot of this debriefing. Okay, now you're back here. What exactly did you learn? How did it happen? Then the other group had 6 hours of contact time, but no credit. And the other group had nothing. And there was no significance when they sort of did the analysis between the 3, but when you added the first 2 groups together, in terms of some post time, there was a higher significance on the GCI like inventory that we forgot about, global proficiency.
From the Associated Colleges League.
They call it the GPI, Global Proficiency Index. That's one of the big, and we've matched that index to our own study abroad goals. It's a little complicated.
Did you remember where did that come from?
I don't
Does it come from?
I don't
They were
know.
exposed
Because there
to
are
it.
several of those rubrics that do deal with things.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because
I'm
they
not
were-
sure.
The LEAP had, the ACU has it.
You know, I don't know where that came from. So, you know, I don't think that's like conclusive research that says this is important. But it did show that there was some bump, you know, of the students that had a post. The problem with the post is there's not a lot of faculty and student support, as you can imagine. So right now, with my London class, we aren't getting any compensation or anything for doing we're creating a book from all the photographs and experiences they did in London. We're going to blurb.com, you can create your own book. And we met 3 or 4 times. They're sending us their texts and we're editing it. So, you know, we are working in terms of faculty. They're coming to these meetings. You know, nothing is sort of being counted. We're just sort of saying this is an extension of what you did in January. And I think it's a really important extension. So having a final project where half of it is really about reflecting, to me, we are doing the post, we just aren't getting the credit for it. But I think if you ask every faculty member to spend, you know, February and March meeting again with their students, and say, oh my gosh, you know, why don't I just spend the whole 3 weeks with them? Do I want to keep? But also, you know, they have the new semester started and all this new stuff is going on. So do students want to take another 1 credit? Do faculty want to spend more time with it? I think if they're really committed to the deep reflection and all of that, then they might do it, particularly if they got credit, right? If they got paid, like we did in the pre-departure, you know, $1,000, you'd be like, okay, I'll meet with them for X number of hours so we can have this credit. So we're just still discussing. Again, this is just for the winter term. But I think for the year long, as you mentioned with yours, these are just some of the things that we are doing for on the return. The French and the Spanish departments have just started, literally this fall it's going to start, that every student studying abroad who's a French and a Spanish major has to do a 4 credit extra kind of course that's 1 before, 2 during, and 1 after. And so there's one person in the department who that's their job for that particular semester to be like the undergrad, like the independent study faculty member to work with the students that are abroad. And so the tutoring mean that they're going to be Skyping while the students are abroad. I'm not sure how often, it depends on the student or schedule, but it could be every couple weeks or something.
That would be one course for that faculty member.
One course for that faculty member.
And these are students who are not just all in the same
No,
location in
they're
Frankfurt.
anywhere in Francophone or Spanish speaking.
Okay.
So how many students would this one faculty for one course be taking care of?
That's, I don't know, I don't know, in terms of how many majors the French and Spanish department has. But I would say it's kind of experimental because they haven't done it yet. I mean, they might do it for a year and realize, well, maybe this didn't really have the results we wanted in terms of students feeling more interculturally competent or feeling more, immersed or connected or something like that. Maybe the faculty, are not keen about it, but that's I feel like they're kind of like a model that's going to start, and if that goes really well, then I could see us having conversations on campus. Well, maybe now international studies students, because they're the ones who are required to do it, not making every student on the whole campus do this, but maybe a smaller group. The other thing is that we have a new core seminar, meaning it's one of these 300 level seminars that every student has to take a 300 level kind of general interdisciplinary seminar. And a professor in English who's done several study abroads that he has led is teaching a course called The Impact of Studying Abroad. So it's completely voluntary, but they get credit for their general education 300 course. And the whole semester is actually, they are studying some of this terminology and some of these tools that we just mentioned, like the GCI. They're learning what does intercultural competence mean, what is a global citizen. And so they start kind of with the abstract and theory, reading study abroad journals, right, which how many students are reading study abroad journals. But then it's a lot about kind of what you said in terms of the person, where they go through and they very much talk about particular experiences they had, how it affected them, what happened, what's their identity, what was their identity when they're over there, because you can create a whole new identity when you're abroad. And then when you come back, well, how did people react to what happened to you? How you reacted? And so I talked to the professor before I came, and he says they're on the, I think, 4th semester doing it. They got 25 students, and he didn't do any big marketing, like, hey, you guys who just went abroad, like, come take my class. Most of them just found it or through word of mouth. But he says it's going pretty well, and he's going to keep doing it. Now, obviously, that's only hitting 25 students a semester, but I think it's a start to have some opportunity. And, it's a self-selected course. Like when I said our students really into, what we're doing, he said, well, they've chosen the course because they feel this need, like, I need to unpack this and I need to process this.
I just smile because I have this one student, I'm not going to say it because it's not, maybe it could be great, but they get really excited about certain experience and then they will talk about that in every single class. And they will write all their papers. Manuel and I had this student and we were like, I was saying, oh, it's an interesting paper on such and such. And he says, oh, he wrote the same thing. But it's, so I think even if you don't have formal impact model,
it's going
I
to
think it's going to trickle down in their, and ideally, it should be reflected in all of their college. Maybe not to that extent, that's an extreme example, and probably not desirable either from point of view of faculty to have, students only talk about one experience, but talk about multiple experiences.
Well, and to make sure that they're not talking about it in just like hanging out with their friend for coffee talking.
Exactly.
Right, and it's different to just say, let me tell you about this crazy thing that happened to me while I was in Florence. Well, that's different than, I think, in a classroom with a faculty member who we hope is going to put that in some wider context about intercultural learning or about American identity or
Well, if they're going and doing this interesting work in immigrant communities in London, then they could come back to Swanee and they could take courses, they could be intentional.
Right,
That's
that's
where
right.
they help them be more intentional about selecting courses where they can engage with the scholarship to better understand community issues and all of that. And that shouldn't be that
And that's where the
difficult,
advising comes
given
in.
the wide variety of courses that we have in politics and IGS,
Yeah.
languages, and so on.
So you guys have the courses, I think, but then where does that come from? Is that the advisors then kind of responsibility to say, oh, I noticed you went to Belize and did ecotourism, so let's see what the environmental studies department has that may, so I think there would need to be some training sessions or workshops with advisors on, again, this intentionality which is so key, because as you said, we could just be doing all these things all over the place, and students could just be picking random things, instead of trying to make it be more structured.
My experiences were pretty random when they come back. I mean, they've had these great experiences, but then
They don't know what they
they take this, and they take that, and it
Yeah.
doesn't all sort of fit
Some
together.
departments do this thing of having all the students give a presentation to our own little community, like our Russian students. How many did we have abroad last fall? 5 of our majors spent a semester abroad. And when they come back, they present to our little community. And of course, there's so many that were going abroad, they're all want to hear it and exchange stories.
Right.
At the minimum, that's something. But for instance, the person who, has got these deep experiences have presentations to the community.
Yeah, well, and we talked about that, because I
And have
just,
snacks, really good.
yeah,
Really good.
international.
Yeah, no, Justina has done that to a lot of
Yeah.
our meetings, had a lot of really cool international snacks.
Well, that's one thing I just became the coordinator for international studies, so I'm just starting to kind of, in a more intentional way, think about this stuff. And one of our ideas is to have, multiple panels, maybe it's by region or something, that invite everyone on the whole campus, food from that region, and have them share their experiences, and have the sophomores and the first years who are thinking about going, come to that. My other idea was to do like a lunch table thing, like, different, you probably have like language tables, right? So could you have, okay, the people who went in the fall, like in the spring, we're gonna have a European study abroad, I don't know how you call it, a table, right? So for that week or 2 weeks, anybody who did study abroad in Europe, let's say, could come. I would be there as the coordinator. Students who are interested in going to one of those places could come. And it would just be a kind of, again, I don't know if anyone would show up. I
Well,
don't
no,
know
we
if
can
it
do
would
all,
work.
we can do all study abroads, people who've done
Could
everywhere.
do all. I didn't know if it would be too many, but it depends on who comes. But, that is kind of more of a social, so they don't feel like it's formal, like the professors there, like doing all these things. So those are 2 small things. We also have these couple other things. We have a global ambassadors program. So the students who go abroad can apply to be an on-campus global ambassador. I think there's maybe 40 a semester. Some of the things they do is share stories and information in different settings with students that may go abroad. They also go into our what are called Elon 101 courses. I don't know if you guys have this. This is all freshmen take a 1-credit course their first semester. That's like everything you need to know about Elon, things you need to know about college, the library, about possible study abroad opportunities, about 4-year plan. They make a 4-year plan that, of course, is probably going to change, right? But they learn about what are the requirements for your major. So it's kind of like a deep advising course, but it also means people come in from the community or from the university and give guest lectures. So the global ambassadors go around to all the Elon 101s and say, I just went to Sevilla, and let me tell you how amazing study abroad is, and you're only a first year, but think about your 4-year plan that you have to make by next March, or by March, think about where you want to study. So it's already in their head, like from day one, right? They also talk about winter terms as well while they're there, if they happen to implement them.
We have this, extensive set of workshops and talks and everything during the freshman advising period, but the students are not required, they're supposed to attend. And sometimes it seems like they might be required, but not always for, and this is very good way.
Does that still exist?
Yeah,
I
it
think
still
it
does.
does, okay.
It still does, but everyone just signs in and leaves.
Yeah,
That's generally what everybody does.
Okay, so I'm just
Thanks
thinking.
for clearing that up.
Very well.
That's something you might think about. So that also is another, now that is an addition to the faculty load. Faculty that's supposed to be shared across departments, so the chair will come to our political science department and say, I need 2 people for the fall to do Elon 101, right? It's 1 credit, they get some type of stipend, it's probably the same as the 1 credit that I mentioned before for the pre-departure, I don't know if it's exactly, but I think the money kind of works out. And most of the junior faculty who have signed up to do that say it's really helped them to learn more about Elon and to learn how to be an awesome advisor. Because they have to know that, those requirements inside out. They have to know all about the different majors, and they have to know about so many different things that they haven't really complained that it's like, oh, gosh, I'm going to do what I have to do. I'm sure some people, I've never taught it, for example. No one's asked me, just doing things. So that's something to think about. We also have another 1 credit, and what is 1 credits? That's called Going Global. So, yeah,
So if you get 4 of these random 1 credits, does that up to displace a full course for them? Is that how that works?
That would, but it would be an elective then.
A
It
what?
would be 1-1-1.
But is that how the accounting takes place? Or-
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm talking a lot, and I feel like I'm talking too much. So
Our students do that too. I mean, they take Swanee praise for 4 semesters, and that counts for something,
So
yeah.
what?
Praise or choir or whatever, yeah.
Library science, that's all.
some physical
They
ed courses
already
too,
do.
but like 1 or 2 credits, yeah.
Well, that's good.
Well, I don't know if it's good, but they do.
I like the way of producing a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether you have thought of producing a basic documentary, like going with somebody like Maccabi who knows how to even just to capture those
Yes.
fresh experiences before students leave the field.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think that's when they make the most natural reflections. Yeah.
So you mean while they're still there?
Yeah.
Like for the winter term
Like a
courses?
day before they leave.
Ah.
That's a good one.
Well, you know, one thing that the professor who's doing this study abroad course,
Yes.
he's doing a story corps in that course. Like the NPR. So he's, instead of having it be a monologue though, because he wants it to be more of a conversation, he's get 2 or 3 students together and they tell a story, like a story, and they first listen to storyboard, some are not really, but anyway. And they hear kind of what StoryCorps is, and then they do a story with each other, and then they ask each other questions about it, and they reflect. And then he's going to somehow be like archiving those.
This is great,
So
great
that
stuff.
anybody in the university could like click somewhere and hear about it. Maybe students, you could like email a link to students who might be going to whatever place that they went to. So there's lots of these, you know, small things that I think are trying to take off.
That's
you
a
know?
great idea. I really love that idea.
Yeah,
You know, Pradeep
but like you
does
said,
that
doing it
stuff.
while they're there, I think, and then maybe even
Maybe
later.
even after.
Because as we know from the research, the transformation doesn't happen the day they come back. It might be 6 months, a year, 5 years later, right? So how do we,
I think even realizing the importance of that tree.
yeah,
It's not something that is immediate. It is like ethnographic research.
Right.
You come back with all this, it's a mountain of data, but if you ask what you got, chances are you say, it was frustrating.
yeah,
But when you start analyzing, that's when you
Right.
I need all this.
right.
There are these linguists that are studying endangered languages that one of the things they do is they gather up the last bits of languages, they produce children's books in that language and hand them to people before they leave as a project. Worldwide, that would be a fun thing. The project does something similar when he goes to communities, both here
Yeah, he's been
and
talking
maybe
about this Haiti part,
produce,
sounds amazing.
have people help them learn to
Yeah.
produce a history of their own life and family
Mhm.
so that it becomes for them a history book and a continuance of their own culture and it has one
Right.
photography in it. But the idea of using a hands-on thing like that, not only for our students, but I mean for the people that they're engaging with, like if they produced a pic, your kids who go to these communities could leave something also with the people that they work with.
Right, well, they're going to send some of these books back. They're
Okay.
ordering some extra ones. We did get some money from the Global Education Center so that we could buy extra books. And we can't send to every single person that was interviewed, but like maybe the community center could have one, right? But this particular course, we used to have them do a video. The book is just this here. They used to do a 10-minute kind of video diary. I don't know if that's the right word, but they would use their images and they would use the narratives of the people themselves, right? So it's not really supposed to be me telling you what I thought about these people, but the voices of them themselves. And there's some kind of theme, so like one student found a bunch of kids from all over the world at this skate park in Brixton, right? Found this like Hungarian Jamaican kid, for example, who was like the leader of the skate park, and he became like one of his main kind of interview, you know, subjects. And he did this great video where he got like pictures and video of the skate park, and he has interviews with the students and or with the kids. And, so we decided to do the book. I'm not sure Ken, my colleague, thought the book might just be a way to kind of reflect more, because in the video they do put a little bit of the reflection in, but I think the book allows them to say a little bit more.
We do blog before,
Yeah.
during, and after.
Yeah, we haven't had to do that, but that would be something really, really good for.
Especially because that's something they could reflect on after, the months after.
Like, what did they write the first day they got there, and then compare it to?
Or what did they think before they left?
All right.
When they were preparing for it.
Which is part of why the pre-departure course is interesting, because we ask them, like, what are your assumptions about Britain, right, or about immigrants in Britain, or what, you know, whatever the course is, and it's interesting to see, like, why they took the course and what they think about all this before they get there. So the other thing, so that Going Global is actually like a career kind of course. So we have some people from the Student Professional Development Center teaching a course about like global opportunities. Like now that you've come back, you may be interested in going back to teach English or to do graduate work or whatever it is. And so they learn more about those opportunities in this course. Again, just of their own choice if they want to take it, but I've heard from students that that was kind of useful in thinking about postgraduate kinds of plans.
So then do people in the career services office, I mean, do they have the training background,
Good
connections,
question.
linkages
The,
to?
from what I heard, we have a position that's focused on global and career. So that's the person that does it. That's, I think when they're hired, that's like part of, you know, so I don't think they are paid extra to do that one credit. I think that's sort of part of their job, because it's during the day and they do teaching. But it really would depend on who that person is, because sometimes those jobs kind of, you know, rotate. I mean, somebody might not stay. It might be like a jumping off job to something else. So they're maybe, you know, like a recent graduate themselves and then they stay for 2 years. So that's a good question. I mean, it's not an academic course for sure. It's more like a technical about how we navigate networking and opportunities. So, yeah.
What are the requirements when students have to learn the language associated with the majority of business? Are there such requirements?
It depends on the program. I think most programs, like when I looked at your full semester study abroad list, it's really long and extensive, which I thought was great that every kind of opportunity was available if you want to homestay or you want to go abroad or you want this kind of program. So I think it depends on the program if they require language. I think most of them don't require it. A lot of the people who go to the Spanish-speaking world and might do direct enrollment or courses directly like at University City, for example, then they're going to have Spanish above 300 level so they can take those courses. But for most of them, and I would say it's the same for you, but maybe I'm not, maybe in Russian it's different. You have to have Russian, like enough. But the courses are not in Russian that they take, are they?
They take, some of them take courses all in Russian, some of them balance it out. So,
Okay.
yeah, if you haven't had a lot of background.
Right.
It used to be that when SIT ran a program in St. Petersburg, before it was threatened to shut down by the mafia, seriously.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was an example of a non-language intensive one. So I think that there are places, for instance, I just ran into a student the other day who done IES in Germany who had no German language background. And yet we have many other students who are doing language intensive, immersive experiences.
From what I've seen, the majority have, again, I'm looking more at the sample I know, which is international studies majors, so that's going to be a skewed sample because they already have a higher foreign language requirement and they're interested in language. The majority of them definitely have some language, whether it's at the level they can do courses in that target language. I think most of them probably not. But again, I think some of the French and Spanish and maybe German programs did really well. But then you also see, because you know, they get their language requirement met abroad, most of them, and then bring them back. But that is a concern. Like I didn't mention our centers. That's a whole other thing that's faculty that I didn't mention. And I think that's another way that we have the buy-in and the investment, and also giving students more opportunities to do different kinds of study abroad. Because many of them, you know, their parents don't want them to go to some place where there's no other Elon student or nobody that they like, no Elon faculty. You know, I would be the one who wants to go to that kind of program, but maybe some parents want like a safer kind of option. Maybe some students want to be there with other Elon students. So we have 4 centers. The Shanghai one is just now starting to fall, but for a very long time, I don't have any others. We have London, Florence, and San Juan in San Jose.
So could you tell us what that involves, for instance,
Yeah.
either in San Juan or Shanghai?
So it's what it is that there's an Elon faculty that goes every semester to the location. We have a provider in each place that is only providing for our students. Okay, so they're in classes with only each other. So in Florence this semester, I think there's like 70
Oh,
students.
from Elon.
70,
Wow.
just from Florence, Elon. So the professor who goes teaches one course. It's always a GST, which is a General Studies 300, that one that I mentioned earlier. We apply, like for example, I'm going to Florence in 2018, but I applied like 3 years ago. So there's a huge wait list. It's very long. They're out to 2020 now for booking these programs, right? And you have to submit a course description, not a full syllabus, but at least the course description that shows that it's interdisciplinary, you know, that it somehow connects to where you actually are. So I'm doing something on European identity and immigration, I think. So the students do not have to take the course taught by the young professor. I think that they should, because I think that, you know, if we are making sure that that's a very rigorous course, then we have some kind of control that everyone who's going over takes that. The majority do, especially if the numbers are smaller, because they don't want to feel left out. Like, oh, all the ELA students are taking Professor Simolar's, you know, general whatever course, but then like these 5 are not, right? So it depends on the numbers, and I don't know if they do 2 sections if there's 70 students. I don't know about that.
What's your student body?
Like 4,500, I think that is.
I'm curious to know that these providers who are doing are sort of big, major study abroad providers or a local university.
I think the name of the one in Florence is escaping me. The one in England is Anglo-American. So they are providers that provide for lots of other, like they have like contracts. So they basically contract out a professor. So they'll get an Italian professor who's teaching for some other study abroad program, who's teaching his own class at the University of Florence or whatever it is, and then teaching one class like for us. So we do, we don't necessarily hire those outside faculty members, but we do kind of look at their evals. We do kind of make sure, you know, hear from the students, like if someone's just atrocious, because there's been a few cases where somebody was contracted out and they really just weren't that, you know, good of a professor. And so we kind of said, can you find someone else to this provider?
I have a quick question about the international centers. So these 4 centers or campuses, are they running both semesters, or is there a sort of year-round Elon presence in all of these zones? For instance, when you do your London program, is there any connection at all to this other sort of
So
virtual?
we used to have Anglo-American was our like housing provider for both our 3-week thing and the full semester, but for some reason that's beyond me, that's like administrative, we decided to go with someone else for the 3-week, and then the semester is still running with Anglo-American. So there could be a connection with it. The other difference is, so there is a kind of concern among faculty that those programs are just not that rigorous, right? That's the concern, that it ends up being this island bubble, right? The ELA students all together. They're in Florence, for example, where everyone speaks English. It's super touristy. The faculty members do try to create kind of immersive experiences and cultural opportunities. And the language instructor in Florence, for example, is very good about kind of connecting with the faculty member to take them out to different, you know, cultural experiences, I guess you could say. But you still don't get over the fact that they are still with ELA students in the housing, in all the classes. And they do take Italian there. But do they come back and continue to take it in Elon? The numbers that I've seen show that not a lot of them do. So you would think, like, maybe they would go and get all excited about Italian language and culture and come back and then take the next level, and a lot of them don't. They don't know the numbers that they have.
So how many credits do the students get for let's say, the Florence program?
So they get a full semester of credits, just like so they get 16 in our case, because it's 4 courses times 4. And one of those 16 might be this faculty-led one.
Because I'm thinking that we already have students who are going to the very popular European studies abroad. And sometimes I think that the quality varies a lot there anyway. But you have at least one of your own faculty there providing a course that you can just assume, you know, is going to be a high quality.
And that's what we assume. I mean, again, we're still assuming that. There may be some faculty who it's not exactly, their course maybe doesn't connect as well, or they maybe don't create assignments that are doing a lot of this reflection. You know, there's also a question, does the faculty member speak the language, right? As of now, it's highly recommended that they take some language course. So like, I'm gonna do Rosetta Stone or go sit in on the Italian class before I go, but I don't think it's required that I do that. We also have faculty members who take the course with the students in the language when they go. And that's been interesting from the faculty members I've talked to, because they feel like it actually made them connect more with the students. They were in the same class with them at the same time. They're learning Italian. Others might say, well, that kind of looks bad, like the professor doesn't know Italian, she has to. So again, there's kind of some pros and cons to that. I think it's easier for Costa Rica because we have a number of Spanish-speaking, I think more than we have Italian-speaking faculty members that go. But it's definitely not a requirement. I mean, there's people in, well, pick on chemistry again, you know, someone in chemistry who doesn't speak any, either of those languages who would,
Well, if you're teaching a course on immigration, you're not teaching a town culture course.
Right,
Those
right.
immigrant communities are not just.
Exactly. I think it's more for logistics, like, you know, but, I mean, in Florence, I don't think they really need it from what I heard, because everyone, a lot of people speak English. We have had discussions, we have a committee right now that's talking about, foreign language acquisition and kind of deepening stuff about it. We've been talking about, like, on the Florence program, especially because it's so big, could we have like a core group, like a subgroup of the 70 that knows Italian a lot better than the other students who, and this kind of sounds bad, but like maybe they're just more into like the program and the learning experiences, and maybe they, I don't know, we just threw this on the table like 2 weeks ago, so I shouldn't even mention it, but you know, we've just been talking about how we can make these centers, you know, more rigorous, because again, it's not that I think that they're not important, but there's a question out there that we've been talking about, is some study abroad always better than none? Right? Can you assume that just because they went somewhere that something happened to them and that it was globalizing here and then and all that? And I don't think that's the case. I mean, I have just an anecdote where one of my colleagues was saying, she asked, I think, 2 students who came back about their experience, like, what is the most important thing you kind of learned? And they said, I learned how, you know, how happy I am that I live in the United States. Like, how lucky I am that I'm from here. And she was just so stunned. You know, I mean, maybe that could be the 4th thing that's like most important. But that was the thing they chose to tell their international studies. You know, and she was really upset. She's like, if that's what we're doing, is sending students abroad to just come back and say that they feel so happy that they don't have to deal with all the stuff that they have. So, that's, you know, that's bad. So I think that that's part of this deepening that we need to think about, and that I think comes from advising, which is good for what liberal arts colleges are, is to encourage students when they're sitting down doing their semester plan, 4-year plan, or whatever, is to try to gear them toward the study abroad programs that we know from looking at them are maybe more rigorous. Like, I know you guys are connected to SIT, as we are, right? And I know SIT, they require independent research. They've been known to have more experiential learning in terms of their courses. I'm not saying that we have ones on our list that are bad, but you know, if you know a student is really a top student, like we have, you know, some of our top students will come to me and say, oh, I want to go on our Florence program. You know, not that I want to say it's a bad program, but you could go to St. Andrews in Scotland, which is known to have a really great program. You could go to Jordan and do diplomacy. Like, there are some really great programs that fit your plan and your interests better. You don't have to just pick that one. So again, it sounds like I don't like the Florence program, but I think there is a program for everyone out there. And for some students, that program works for them, but for others, I think they should be going to other kind of programs that are a lot more
No, this is a logistical thing. Students, financial aid, can they use?
Yes.
How does this work? I mean,
It's-
SIT, they can use their financial aid?
Yeah, they can take their financial aid for any of these
Any of these,
programs.
so it's not just the
CIE,
Elon
SIT,
programs.
or the Elon programs, yeah. But I think, the thing I think is so great about these centers is, again, it gets this faculty involvement, right?
Sure.
And we don't have any trouble getting faculty to go. But you ask the question about, is it every semester?
Yeah, I was
So-
just curious to know if there's a constant Elon presence.
There is a
in all of
constant-
these
Costa Rica,
settings.
we were starting to have a little less enrollment, so we've changed that to every other semester. So I think it's every spring or every fall, I don't know which one. But the others have enough students as every semester.
I'm also
And then-
sort of curious about the physical location. Is there
So there's a
sort of
building.
like residence
Like,
or?
I can't remember the Florence group, and I visit that. So Anglo-American or the Florence provider, there is a building that provider has where the courses are held. The housing is different in each case. I think in Florence, they are housed in apartments that are somewhat centrally located. We've talked about the homestay idea, but part of the problem is those homestays would be far away from the center because most people can't afford to live in the center, and there was a concern about them being like so far out. Although I would say that the homestay, I mean, I would always say homestay is better in terms of language and culture and all that. But as of now, Costa Rica though does do homestays. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, so they're not all the same. Costa Rica has homestays.
Try to always make that a possibility for our students in Russia, of course.
Yeah, I think it should be an option. Like the DIS program that you guys also have that we do in Copenhagen program.
For students going on this.
Yeah, it's a really popular program for ours as well. And, you know, they have the option. They can live in an apartment with a Danish student. They can do a dorm kind of situation with other international students, they can do homestay. And I talked to students who did all three, and they were very conscientious about why they chose what they chose. And they said, I specifically want a homestay for these reasons. And I was like, great. And then the other one was like, I really know that I wouldn't get along well, and I have issues, and I wanted to really go, So I think it's good that we offer different alternatives, but at the same time, as advisors, I think try to start by recommending what we think would lead them to have more of a kind of rich, immersive
Face that question you brought up, I think with Christina, about an institution having a little more control over the global experience of the students in these diverse things, to try and a little bit forestall that sort of incident where you have Americans who go and simply become more entrenched. I think it would be great for a center to offer sort of a cohesive training for all the people who are going to be doing abroad things on those issues of how to break through cultural barriers. And that was addressed at the conference we were at.
Training for faculty.
Yeah, for faculty, because that's one of the roles we're playing, not just to teach them, about Italian economics or whatever.
Right.
But in terms of our goals here, our global goals and creating global citizens and all that. And so each of those centers, for instance, would be important also to have someone there that could be looking to that. But I think in our case, the new center that's being made, it would be great to have that as one thing that we could all get guidance and training in how to impart to the
So
students.
what's this new
I was
center?
going to ask,
Sensitivity, diversity, why it's important, all the things that are important.
Sorry, question.
I'm sorry.
But I do remember it, yeah.
Back to these, when faculty go and leave a semester, that counts as part of their normal teaching load, I
Yes.
assume?
So they're only teaching one, sometimes two, so
Okay.
I think if it's a huge group, they might do 2 sections, I'm not 100% sure of that. That counts for their whole load.
And then what about, I assume all their expenses are paid to go?
Everything is
What
paid,
about the family?
dependents can go,
Okay.
they are paid for in terms of flying over. If your spouse can't go, they will pay for the spouse to come over at least one time. If you want them to come twice, you pay the second one. The other benefit, which I'm the last person to receive this benefit in 2018, is that your child's school will be paid for. And in Florence, there's supposedly a very good international school that costs an arm and a leg, like in the massive numbers of thousands. And Elon has been paying in the Florence program for the kids to go, but they've been realizing that, in Costa Rica, it doesn't cost $20,000 or $10,000, it costs, 2 or something. So they have just now done away with that and are giving some kind of, not done away with, but they're giving less. They're not giving like the whole tuition is paid for, it's like a percentage. So I got grandfathered in, so I don't want to do that. So that's a good thing, but if you do have kids and you don't, and they can't go into the public system and do good language or whatever interests you, then there might be the cost of the school. The apartment, I think it's a 2-bedroom, so we have.
But then that enables people with families to go.
Yeah, and a lot of it, I would say the majority of it, when I look at the list of, when I look at the list of like who signed up before and after me, a lot of those people have families and kids. It's not just some people who
That would solve some of the problems with that.
Yeah, but your question about the faculty training, I think that is kind of a miss here because it does depend on who's going. Like this one Spanish professor who's really into all of this stuff that's like part of her research agenda is talking about global education. She did this amazing Costa Rica program, but there are other faculty members who don't take it upon themselves to kind of learn more about intercultural competence and all that stuff. And the training is really just an ad hoc. Like before I go, I'm going to go have coffee with the 2 people who went before me to get all the inside info about the provider and the city and just, but it's not required. Yeah, so there needs to be, and that's one of our conversations with Elon, there needs to be something structured, some kind of training, I don't know how you compensate or how you do it, but so that the people going can talk to the people who've gone and maybe do some reading and have like some lunch and learns or something like that with it.
That needs to be in our letter to the dean.
Yes,
That he asked
I'm
for.
taking notes and pages. Well, I had a question about the center, because I'm afraid we'll run out of time.
Yeah.
What does your Center for Global Education do exactly? What is the structure and what do they do?
That's really good. I didn't get to mention our global neighborhood because I'm so proud of I'll get to the, so we have a global neighborhood, I'll get to the center, because the global education center is in the global neighborhood.
Okay.
So we have 7 neighborhoods, that's how they're like geographically laid out. And they are supposed to have different kind of themes and foci, but really the global neighborhood that's only in its second year is, I think, the flagship neighborhood in terms of having a true kind of living and learning integration where the students that are living there are in linked courses. And those are those 110 global experience courses that I mentioned. So they will be taking their global 110 course together and living in the same kind of hall. But the global neighborhood is really, when I talked about strategic initiatives and like coming from the top, that was one of our big kind of things, is we want to have this profile that connects global issues to living and learning, and we're going to have 600 students, we have 600 this year, living in the global neighborhood. I know that's like half wrong. And then we have a global commons building, which looks like that. And in the global commons building, it's like the hub for everything global. So instead of having the registrar who advises students in the registrar, and the study abroad office over here, and students who are interested in global over here, we have all of that in one building.
Can we have a slideshow?
Yeah, because we didn't get to talk about a lot of them.
I like it.
Well, I got a picture there. We want a center, but it can't be that big, but we can have a little
It's
one
pretty.
there.
I think I would just walk in there with like 40 kids, we'd all walk in there and go, so where am I going?
Yeah,
Like
it's
what?
huge. It has a media room, it has a huge hall that's kind of looks like McLaren if you took out all the stuff in the middle, like couches and chairs or stuff like that. And so the whole second floor is the Global Education Center.
Does it have classroom space?
It has classroom space. Yeah, so International Studies has a room in there, so if you want to have meetings or a class, you can do that in there. The core curriculum is part of that, which I think is sending a message that the core curriculum thinks that global everything is important, so that we put them in that same office. The person who deals with all international student and faculty stuff is in there as well with global education. We have a faculty fellow whose job, they're called international faculty fellows. They get some course releases for that, and their job is to be the liaison between the faculty and the administration on all things related to study abroad, to making your curriculum and your course more global. She's doing assessment, so that survey that I mentioned about the pre-post, she was in charge of that. So her office is in there. The registrar, as I mentioned, she's the one who literally signs off on everybody's form about what's going to transfer back. She's in there. So instead of students, it's like a one-stop shopping, right? They don't have to go all around the campus and do that. And I think it's really also about the symbolism of the neighborhood. So each house has a name that the students voted on it, and they got to choose among rivers of the world. So we have Zambezi, and we have Thames, and we have the Orinoco. Okay. There are global competitions that they have between houses for getting points and things like that. The way that we really bring it together is that the core of it is to have this academic component. So this person in the middle, my client Amy, she's the teacher scholar in residence. So her job is she lives in the global neighborhood. She has an apartment there. She is the one who connects all of the stuff going on with events and the linked courses and the 110 courses to the living experience. So she's available to advise, but she also coordinates all of the things that go on there. And some of the things that she helps coordinate that I also help coordinate every month is a house dinner that is part of their swipe that they go for their normal dinner and their own thing. It's a different menu from a different country each time they go. And the house dinner has a theme. So we invited all the departments to pick a dinner. So this is another way to get buy-in into this global stuff from the department. So poli-sci signed up for March, religious studies signed up for April, and they would come and give a brief, like 25-minute presentation on some kind of theme, whatever their expertise. So the one we did like Middle East and the Arab Spring, I think, when that was right? And at the same time that they're there, they're kind of plugging poli-sci. So there's an advising role going on here as well, because these are all first-year students and a few second-year students who are hearing every month at the dinner all these different faculty members from these different departments talking about something local, right? Then we have discussion leaders at each dinner table who are faculty or staff from global education, let's say, and they are going to lead a discussion after the faculty or whoever has given their little talk. So then it's a one-on-one with the students who live there and some faculty or staff member.
Do you have language houses too?
We have language learning communities, right? So we have like 30 of these living learning communities, like performing arts, and we have German, we don't have Spanish, French. There's an international studies learning community. Obviously, there's some doing environmental studies. So the learning communities that overlap with international are all housed there as well, right? So again, it's trying to put everything together. The dinners are also connected to themes. So the first year, religion and conflict is our theme, then gender and sexuality, and next year we're doing food and culture. And so the dinners sometimes overlap with the theme, and then the film series, the film series that I run, 6 films a year, 6 films in academic year, all are connected to the theme and are trying to get global students to go. Now they do get some kind of points for going to these events, and that's where this house competition comes in, when you're trying to figure out how to get them to go. But it's not required, like no one has to go to the dinner, but it becomes part of the culture, like, oh, it's 6 o'clock, the dinner's starting, like the whole hall, you know, walks around and like, hey, the dinner's starting, we all need to go, right? So not everybody goes, but there seems to be, you know, the numbers are pretty high. Who goes
I really like this thing of making something a part of the culture that they get automatic credit for. I wish we could do more of that to get our students to go to these cool speakers that come, as well as to these sorts of events, to just make it a part of what we do as our life, because there's so much that they keep missing.
It is true. And I think that's one benefit of this, that they're already living together. They get the calendar the minute they walk on campus in August, saying, okay, house dinners are all these Tuesdays. Films are all these Thursdays. Mentor events, because we have a lot of peer mentors in here, and they coordinate their own events. So they have like a cooking demonstration night, or they have like some other event, right? And so they kind of know in advance, like this is what we do when we live in this neighborhood. Now again, it's only one neighborhood. It's only 600 out of the whole. But the hope is that we're going to have,
We have had the cool thing that our
Yeah.
chef, who's incredible, Rick, Wright, has sponsored multiple. Our chef has sponsored people to come and do like Hungarian food, and they all, and the Hungarian students will come, bring recipes, and they'll cook in the dining hall, Hungarian food for everyone.
That's great.
But like a couple of people have gone and taken their classes and worked with them to cook dishes for,
That's perfect.
like, who has done that? Sarah Demis did that with Arabic. Who else has done that? David Miola did it, didn't he? Was it Jewish food?
Well, could something like this work here? I know you don't have the numbers maybe, but I mean, do you have something that you can connect the living and the learning in a way that...
We want to.
Is that something on the agenda?
Yeah.
We're starting to
That's something that we've gotten informed about too.
Really?
And personally, as the student body was voted, is highly against it. The student body doesn't want that, because what we claim is that we go to a liberal arts school. I would want to be, you know, living in, you know, a lot of schools, for example.
Connecting my academics
Yeah,
all the
my-
time to
yeah,
everything? Like,
Yeah, my academic with, you know, that
your
kind of
social,
stuff.
your personal, and there is some pushback too.
Students who live in the language houses apparently want.
Yeah, no, but
If they don't
they
do it
do.
for years, they choose to go there for a year.
Yeah, so you know, that's, you know, but like,
And
I
then
think they
what
had it out for
happens
like,
is
you would do this
sharing.
as going in as a freshman, and kids were pretty
That's
highly
something
against
really to
that.
think about, is each university is gonna have a different student culture, and they may say, like, this is my private time and my private space. Don't have these RAs coming in, talking about events in my class.
But
you know, they
We do more that way, and it's real popular. Like, did you go to the Culture Clash? One of the single coolest events this year in Swanee, you missed it? Kids from
Out of the
all
million
different
of things that I'm supposed to be
Kids
at,
from-
yeah.
Kids from all different cultures came and performed these mind-blowing, sensuous dances, funny comic
It's
skits.
impossible.
There were like 30 or 40 of them. It was insane. It was so wonderful.
But you wouldn't have to make it required. You could have one hall or 2 floors or whatever that was something global, and they could choose to live there.
And most big universities have something like the global.
That's right.
Yeah, we do have something else.
Yeah.
So one expense, I mean, what we do is amazing because we're small, but.
Thank you so much.
Please pass along really, really,
I will.
really warm.
I know, it was great to see you. So you think that it's something that is being talked about in terms of?
Not yet, but we're in the ones to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah, we're actually talking about it, so, yeah.
I mean, I think we have some pushback because, you know, clearly if there's 600 students, not all 600 show up for dinner because that's like physically impossible. So there is a core among there that's really bought into this whole concept that I'm going to do these extra things that are both social, because I'm doing social stuff like eating and going to uni with my friends from my hall, but it also connects to my 110 class and, you know, these other kind of academic things. But you're right, there's going to be just a core that don't, and we're not forcing anyone to go to any of this, but we feel like if we want to up the intellectual climate of the university, we have a whole intellectual climate committee that's trying to change the culture to say, like, this is a university and you should be interested in intellectual.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of friends that go to UM,
People to try to figure out a way to.
they've stated that, you know, if you're in those houses or that in those, like, that area, you don't associate with anybody else. It's like their own, like, circle. And that's what I heard from kids who have gone to UM.
I forgot my road last time, so I thought I'd try to do better.
Yeah. And I will send you this PowerPoint.
Please do.
It's a bunch of other things.
And I was going back to the,
And I'm
the
so
office. Is there